Good evening, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for being here for this very important conversation. My name is Anna Matheson. I am the representative of Calais to the Configuration Committee. I just wanted to share why I joined the committee, just as a foundation for people who don't know me. But as most of you know, a year and a half ago or so, there was a pretty contentious meeting in this room that felt like we really had a lot more to talk about around this topic. And so having sat through that 5-hour presentation and conversation, I felt like it was really important to jump in and kind of hopefully help shape the future and make it a better conversation that everybody feels more positive about. So just wanted to share that, and with that, Daniel's going to set us up.
Yeah, welcome everyone. I'm Daniel Keeney. I'm one of the board representatives on this from Calais, and the Calais board representative on the Configuration Committee. So I want to talk a little bit about what tonight is and what tonight is not. I think it's important to remember that up here we're members of the committee tonight. We're members of the Configuration Committee, which asked to advance and adopt this proposal and move it forward for the board's full consideration. That's the first of 3 primary steps, I think, as I understand them, to something as momentous as a reorganization of the district happening. So I still view this as like very much in the early stages of planning. We heard loud and clear last year that people wanted input earlier in the process. This feels like a really great conversation. I'm on record as saying I want the process to be messy because I want, and someone else said they don't want the public to be presented with a fully baked cake, which they can either accept or reject. They want to be part of the making of the cake. And while voters of a town like Calais, like Worcester, that might be asked to close their school facility, you will have a chance to vote, but you also deserve a right for input throughout the process. And believe when I say please that we're doing our best to make opportunities for that input. So again, we're members of the committee. We have our other 2 Calais board reps here. Michelle Sepka's in the front row here. Elizabeth Brown is in the back taking notes. And they have the privilege and opportunity to just be listeners tonight and not facilitators. The ball will next be in their court to consider this and scrutinize it and think critically about advantages, disadvantages, opportunities, and risks. But for now, the Configuration Committee chose to pass this forward, and also we view our role as also one of facilitation for this process, seeking input, reporting that input back to the full board. There's a lot to get to, so I'm going to try to be brief, but briefly, this committee began meeting in January to talk about ways the discussion of district configuration needed to improve. We were not happy with how the process went last year. We felt like if a plan to reconfigure were developed, it had to be more deliberate and intentional with a clear method this time around. And so, despite the fact that the proposal is the same as last year, I really want to take issue with the fact that some people have represented it as the same process. Just because the conclusion may have been the same, it's not been the same process, and I want to point out some important ways in which the process was different this time around. Back to the way in which we guided the process. We guided this process with a commitment that our priorities for programming should drive the structures of the district. That's been a focus of ours throughout this process. The welfare of the students and how that is served with programming in the district is first and foremost our priority. Our priority has not first and foremost been about finances. Indeed, finances came up really in passing, but only in passing in our committee meetings. We were very focused on programming. We were very focused on the standards, instructional standards, curricular standards for our district, what we wanted to have as norms. Another important way in which it was different is, like Anna, we had members, community members from every town in the district this time, not just board members scrutinizing this. We also had elementary school leadership represented by one of the potentially affected schools. So Gillian Fuqua from Doty was on our board. Excuse me, our committee. Yeah, I'm gonna skip ahead. But I do think we did a fairly specific examination of some specific models and some specific programmatic aspirations that we want to see in our district in the future. We have a list of criteria, which if you want to ask about, we'd love to chat more about. But we also have 10 primary questions that we are hoping to pose to this group tonight and get a response to. And let's see, we have an hour and 40 minutes to do that, which works out to roughly 10 minutes per question. Obviously, there are a lot of strong feelings about this subject in the room, and people are gonna express them, I hope. If you could do your best to frame it in the form of a response to these questions, and I hope these questions are broadly framed enough that there is an opportunity to sort of respond in a germane way, but yeah, I think it's just important to emphasize that, you know, there are two sides to this, and you know, some public comment referenced that the proposal to reconfigure our elementary schools was explicitly rejected last year. I heard some explicit rejection of that proposal. I also heard some explicit support for that proposal. So I just want us to understand that people of good faith can come down on both sides of this, and there are people of good faith in this room who come down on both sides of it. So let's try to honor decorum and respect for each other throughout the process. We went like 12 rounds in the school board getting our norms just right this year, and I think we passed a pretty good version of it, but norms are important, decorum's important, so thank you for honoring that with us. Okay, so question number one. Also, just really briefly, we've got a couple Orca medias here, and we have one microphone. There's one microphone in the back next to the camera. Yeah, if you think of it, do your best to project, because there are folks listening at home. Oh, one other thing that came up in public comment was people wanted a remote option for a listening session, so we have a survey going out. Also with the survey is going to be a link to a remote listening session. I volunteered to be one of the facilitators of that. I'm not sure when it's gonna land. Most nights in the next week and a half I can do it, so I probably will be one of the facilitators, but please stay tuned for when that is happening. So question number one, what kinds of benefits or opportunities could come with multi-town school communities? Meaning an educational community that brings together more than one town. If anyone wants to think about the kinds of benefits or opportunities that might present. Yeah.
Doesn't that assume that Calais and Doty would be closed?
The question does assume that. I would say that's true. That it assumes some facilities would be closed, yes.
So what do you really want to know?
What?
What do you really want to know?
I want to know what you see as potential benefits for that.
It's a non-starter.
Yeah, it is a non-starter.
Yeah.
I'm maybe late to the party, but could you explain why the configuration committee landed on this option again? Like if we hear from you what benefits, why this was chosen again? I mean, I'm reading this, so I'm not understanding what you looked at, what you rejected, why are we here again with this? apologies if others already know, because I
Sure.
don't.
Yeah, as I mentioned, we had a list of criteria the first time around. We felt we needed a clearer criteria the second time around. And we spent 9 months basically listening to testimony, if you can call it that, from our internal district experts in education, from people outside the district. We created a list of criteria that were important to us. First and foremost was programming opportunity, preserving existing programming, expanding programming, and also equity for opportunity and instructional delivery in the district.
So Daniel, I don't see here what expanded opportunity you're proposing by shuttering the schools. I don't see any programmatic value added that you're promising either short-term or long-term, and then taking away an important civic resource of schools in two of our towns. So when you say programmatic opportunities, what are you even talking about? I see no promises of that.
Okay. Thanks for your comment. Let me give you an example. We looked at the deficits and the challenges and the inequities presented by multi-grade classrooms.
Did you look at the benefits and the advantages of multi-grade classrooms?
Yeah, I mean, the discussion was.
Because there are tremendous benefits. That's why we've used them so frequently in this building for decades.
Can you finish the thought, please?
So, to us, the cost was bigger and more fundamental, and that was a lack of equal instructional time when you have multi-grade classrooms versus single grade, straight grade classrooms. Like, there are benefits, there are disadvantages that are social and emotional in nature, but for us, the biggest and most glaring problem with that was that your instructional time with teachers can vary widely based on whether you're in a cohort of 15 kids or a cohort of 7 kids. And for us, that was an unacceptable reality that we're living right now in this district.
Okay, I still don't have an answer on the programmatic advantages, though.
So-
You're not talking about any value, anything extra that we would get from losing this building and this place is a place for kids to get school.
So in a larger school, we would have the opportunity to have more consistently straight grade classrooms. That's the logical, that's what logically follows.
Assumes that that's a benefit instead of a disadvantage.
Yeah, yes, it is. We viewed it as a benefit, and arguably it's subjective, but I think the committee all felt strongly that that was an obvious benefit that we wanted to pursue. Yeah, Rick.
You're asking us to talk about benefits in this. Okay, we can talk about benefits.
There's going to be an opportunity to talk
Let me
about
finish,
concerns
please.
as well.
Don't
I just
cut me
wanted
off.
to- I wanted
I've been a
that-
school board member for 12 or 13 years.
Okay.
I'm pretty familiar with all this. If to who? I'm trying to think, how can there be equity? The outlying towns, their kids are going to be spending much more time on buses. Their parents are going to be spending much more time driving. Their kids this is going to have an impact on their access. And this is going to have a very big impact on the communities. You cannot look at this in just small pieces. I mean, I work in the planning world too, and I worked as a regional planner for a regional planning commission.
Yeah.
I know what the impacts of eliminating a school are in a community. They are not good. You're basically relegating, say, okay, this is going to be an old folks retirement home. Families have to be fairly close to school systems, and that is the reality. So you cannot just cherry pick this. You've got to look at this as the impact on that community. This is the community health.
Yeah.
And if we want to grow and draw parents, don't fool yourself. Northern New England is basically Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, and the top half of Massachusetts are the best states to be in with climate change like it is hitting now. We are going to see population rises here. Now, there's no question about that. The rest of the country is getting hit severely. I work in that world. That's a reality. So let's look ahead a little bit. We do not necessarily, let's not weaken our communities. Let's start to leaven up, and let's start to actually offer, say, look, we can handle your kids. This is coming.
Yeah.
And I work for state government now. There's huge effort going to get housing and figure this issue out and figure the cost piece out.
So that's your lips to God's ears. I would love us to have an expanding population, and I'm looking forward to that. I really appreciate you gave some tangible concerns. That's not the question I asked, but it's the next question, so I appreciate the input. I also want to point out that one other criterion we had was a short driving distance and shorter bus routes. And we believe that bus routes won't be extended by this. And we believe that every school will be within roughly 7 miles or 15 minutes of driving from basically every house in the district.
I designed roads and bridges for V-Trans, and I worked as a senior transportation planner for a county. I worked with transit providers designing routes, so public transit. I know a fair amount about that, and I know this terrain in these areas, and I know the kinds of buses we use. I was on the school board for years. So I do not buy that. I don't think it's safe. And I don't think, you can't tell me the kids out of East Calais are going to be, or off of these remote roads off of between 14 and County Road are going to be just a little bit longer. This is not
I hear the concern, and I can only tell you the information we've been given so far by our bus contractor, and I hear the concern, and it sounds like it bears more digging into. It sounds like people really would like to talk about some concerns also. Sam, did you want to talk about concerns or
I would love
benefits?
to say something. I think it's really important if the folks in the room who are opposed to this plan also consider that maybe they have implicit assumptions coming in here. I live 7 minutes down the road on East Hill Road. My kids spend about 45 to 50 minutes on the bus coming home. Just the assumption that if we move this, if our kids are in a school that's an extra 5 minutes that way, somehow that's going to create a dramatic difference, I think is an assumption, right? It's not an assumption based in fact, it's just an assumption. So I think that's a really important thing to consider. Our high schoolers go to school in Montpelier. And I don't think any of us view that as a safety issue because of the busing. The high school bus goes by my house every morning before the elementary school bus comes by. There's just a lot of assumptions that are being baked into what having our kids be in a building that's 5 minutes away from here is going to mean for our community. And maybe not all of the assumptions are founded in fact. So,
I'm going to answer that because I was a road commissioner and on the select board in this town. I know these roads. And I know this is not a supposition. I also know I have designed bus routes. This is not, I don't base this on pie in the sky. This is not a Donald Trump conversation.
That I live 7 minutes away, my kids are on the bus.
You happen to be 7 minutes away. There are a lot of people in this town that are not 7 minutes away, and they're not as safe.
All right, so here's another way that assumptions can factor in. There weren't enough kids in the 3-4 girl, for there to be a 3-4 girls soccer team just in this school last year. So we were combined with Romney and Doty. And instead of driving 7 minutes to here for practice every day, twice a week we were driving a half an hour each way to Doty for my kids to play soccer, for my daughter to play soccer. Having a bigger school, it would have been easier for me to drive to East Montpelier than it is for me to drive to Doty.
So do that. We did that. We shared teams. When I was at U32, my girls were all in sports. Montpelier competed with U32 at times. So did some of the other, this is not something that's uncommon. That's sport, that's fine.
I want to just emphasize one thing. Not every statement by every person in this room has to be repeated by another person in this room, okay? Two truths can exist at the same time. Yeah.
Can I just, I want to say what you just said, that if we only got an hour, people keep in mind 5 minutes, you can continue this later.
Yeah.
My question is, since you've been working on this for a year, can you update us on what the current assumptions are about the size of classes? Because I know some kids have moved into Calais, and I'm just curious whether we're basing all this consideration about closing the school on, what the current figures are and how they might have changed.
To have our superintendent here, who offered to our configuration committee a fairly comprehensive memo on that subject. I don't know if you have a copy on you, but I have a copy on me. But would you care to field that question about classroom size?
So the classroom sizes here at Calais fluctuate a little bit between being able, well, I'd have to look at the exact numbers, but they fluctuate between a small of 10 and a high of 18 in a grade level. And so a class, so if we do multi-grade classes, which are something that we put into the model as well, what we wanted to make sure is that we didn't have multi-grade classes that changed every year. We would prefer to have, if we have multi-grade, that it's a 1-2 class, and it's always a 1-2 class. It's not a 1-2 one year, a 2-3 the next year, a 3-4, because that requires the curriculums to be rewritten every year. And so that's an issue that we tried to avoid when we looked at this model. But what we also see is over at East Montpelier's, their class sizes per grade level are in the upper 20s. And so splitting up their classes, so if you have a third grade class that's 27 kids, that's too big. But splitting it up into two classes, a class of 13 and a class of 14, right? And so when we looked at combining with Calais and East Montpelier grade levels, what we would have at East Montpelier in the building, right? I don't want to call it the East Montpelier Elementary School because we'll look at creating new school communities. But within that building, you would have two classes per grade level that were 16 to 19 kids. So your second grade would have 2 classrooms, 16 to 19 kids. Your third grade would have that. Whereas here, you would be switching between classes sizes of anywhere from 20 to 24 if you were combined grade levels, or you would have classes as small as 10 if you were straight grade level.
2 more quick questions. How many kids are currently in school, and what's the projection for like a year or two down the road?
So currently you have, in Calais right now, we have, let me make sure I get the right numbers here. You have 89 students, kindergarten through 6th grade. And East Montpelier has 174.
And how many pre-K?
That's kindergarten through.
Right, so how many pre-K?
Pre-K, what's your pre-K? 11 for next year, yeah. And we're also talking about how we can create more pre-K opportunities within our district. Different discussion, but just so you know. The projected enrollment here in Calais is actually pretty flat. So it shows that the Calais population is going to be somewhere between probably 79 and 85 kids over the next 5 to 8 years. It's not changing a whole lot. There is but Calais' population over the last 10 years declined by 16.7% over the last 10 years. And it's projected to actually decrease by about another 5 to 6%. East Montpelier is the exact opposite of that. Over the past 10 years, it's only declined by 6%. And over the next 10 years, it's projected to decline by 24%. So when we look at combining the schools, the size of a school that would be the combined schools would be a little bit larger than East Montpelier was 10 years ago.
Do you think those numbers were affected by the fact that the school might be closed in Calais? Would you buy a house in a town where they're talking about closing the school, or would you go to East Montpelier where they're talking about merging with it?
So I can't, so the one thing that the committee asked of me in looking at the reconfiguration was how would it affect home values and all of that. There isn't data on that in Vermont. And so I don't know, and I can't predict that. Now, there may be somebody else out there who can, but I haven't found them yet. And I haven't found data that supports it one way or another. The only data that's out there says that if a town does not have a school, but it has school choice, then the values of those homes tend to go up. But I would also say Act 73 may change how that works anyway, in terms of school choice with towns that do not have schools. So I can't predict how that's going to fall
How
out.
long would the kids be on a bus compared to here? If the kids in the community go here, versus going to East Montpelier?
So the early estimates on that, we based it upon the kids that are going to school right now. If we were busing them from their current location to one location as opposed to two. Right now, kids in Calais are on the bus anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes. If they were going to East Montpelier, it may be about 5 minutes more. And there are students at the very far edge towards the Woodbury line that fall outside of our 15 minutes or 7 mile range. And so there are kids out there at the edge. It's about 6 to 8 kids that fall outside of that transportation zone.
I'm gonna let the folks speak in just a minute. I just want to acknowledge that we went past our time on the first question. The second question is the flip side of the coin, which we have dug right into. What concerns and worries do you have when you think about possible school closures? But I would really appreciate this not being a Q&A with Stephen. There are going to be other opportunities for that. And Stephen's very accessible by email for those who have those questions also. But tonight what we're trying to do is get as much feedback about this, positive or negative, that people have and can offer us. So we'll still field views on the benefits of this proposal, and also concerns and complaints about the proposal.
So what's this question?
I'm sorry, Barry, there were
Just tell me what
three
the
hands in
question
there.
is.
So the first question was what kind of benefits and opportunities could come from multi-town school communities? And the second question was what concerns or worries do you have when you think about possible school closures? Ainsley?
If this feels too much of a Stephen question, I'm happy to put it into an email, but I'm wondering about how much of East Montpelier's space would be used under this configuration model. Specifically, will all of the classrooms be utilized? Will there be space to grow if we do have an increase in population due to, say, less enrollment in private schools, for example?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that question. Stephen, feel free to weigh in on it. It's an important question for me. When I switch hats and become a board member, not a committee member, I think we have to look at the capital expenses related to this transition. And even if everyone fits today, if we go from 5 elementary schools to 3 elementary schools, I want to understand how flexibility for growth works there. So. But I don't know if you have thoughts on.
So a quick response is that we would be utilizing almost every classroom at East Montpelier's facility, and every grade level could absorb anywhere from 6 to 10 additional kids before you would have to add another classroom. So you would have the ability to expand the size of each grade level by anywhere from 6 to 10 kids without getting anywhere near our class size maximums.
I thought I heard some of the class sizes would be 19 though, and that's on the brick of 20, which is the higher end of the ed quality standards.
Correct. And so there are a couple of classes, and that's where we would only have room for maybe 6 kids overall.
And you have 46 kids in 5th grade right now, if it was merged. So even with 2 classrooms, you're over the 20. Because you have 14 kids in 5th grade at Calais and 32 in 5th grade at East Montpelier. So.
Yeah, I have a couple kids coming up to go to school, and it is disappointing.
Could you just speak up a little bit for some of this?
I have a few kids that are coming in, and 3 of them are actually homeschooled. And, you know, it's disappointing to see this, and I know it's emotional for everybody. Most people here are probably opposed to it. That's why the attendance is here. Pros and cons to consolidation go both ways, and they're subjective. I do think if all schools were filled, that would be best. Feels like we're trying to fix the symptom and not the underlying cause, and the 10-year projection is looking at the current stats. But as a community, it is an illness. The aging population is an illness. How do we get to that root cause to solve the issue? I mean, with less kids are coming to Calais and that projection drop, you know, you're dropping the tipping point even more because you're sinking the ship. So probably even fewer kids are going to come to Calais. How does that affect, you know, snow shovelers, the contractors that are doing the work in the middle age that get older? And you know, that's a statewide issue, from Act 250 to, you know, housing development. You know, Calais, we should really be focused on how to increase that population and have hopes that our 10-year projection can get higher and hold the boat afloat.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess I can say, like, we just moved here a month ago. We just bought a house.
Welcome.
Thank you. We just bought a house down the street, and for me at least, one of the selling points was being 5 minutes from this school. If this school wasn't here, we probably still would have moved here, but it would have been a harder decision to make. And so, yeah, like, we don't have the data on, like, will young families move here, but probably, like, I don't know if we would have made that decision to move here without a
We
school.
just moved here too with 3 kids.
Yeah.
Welcome to you.
Yeah.
I think one perspective, as someone with a first grader and a fourth grader, both of whom are without a doubt going to be affected by this if it comes to pass, is that it's a possibility that 3 high-functioning schools could be better than 5 schools that are suffering. And I'm not suggesting they're suffering now, but we have to think about risk mitigation as a school board, and you know, we're looking down the barrel of a pretty significant potential budget reduction, and we already don't have our nurse as much as we want here. We already don't have our librarian as much as we want here. So there are factors at play that it shouldn't necessarily be assumed that we're going to be able to preserve the Calais Elementary School of today as long as we all want to. And I think one other thing is there's this facility, if it were to close as an elementary school, it also represents other opportunities. Elizabeth was on a task force, or I think this is still standing task force, the early childhood ed.
I was not.
Oh, you weren't? Oh, excuse
Diane
me.
was. That's
Diane,
okay.
I'm
That's
sorry.
okay.
So we had an early ed task force that looked at the possibility of increasing our pre-K hours in the district from 10 to 25 hours weekly, which is a huge opportunity. I think it's worth pursuing. It's going to be hard to do in the current budget climate, but you know, having early ed centers is another possibility of something we could do, either the district could do, or the town could do, or a nonprofit could do in a space like this. So, yeah, I don't know. I was going to tie that all together, and Barry.
Okay, so I've only been in this town for 65 years, and I have no kids here. I've supported every school budget. And what I've seen here, and I also went to an inner city school in Detroit, overcrowded, triple sessions. What I've seen here is everybody I know, people in my age group with kids or younger, have made their community because of the school. You know, and in fact, I many times said the school paper ought to go out to those of us who don't have kids. And I think the concern here is the premature idea of closing now, when after the first consolidation, nobody has been able to show, at least I haven't heard of any real savings. I'm not saying this school won't close, because when we expanded the school in 1990, there was a projection of 258 kids here. And I was one of the people who opposed based on analysis of student body, that we wouldn't make that. But I just think the feeling that I heard the last time we were here and now is that if we want to have a community, we shouldn't be talking about closing this school right now. Not that it might not happen, but I think it's premature when there's so many things in play. We just had a vote for $149 million, what's the center? The center, and we don't even know what's happening with anything else. I looked at the totals of students at U32, it's 691 now. It was built for 900. We spent $12 million to build that school based on projections. East Montpelier built their expansion based on numbers that haven't come true yet. So I agree with people who say we really need to be looking at housing and bringing in some younger people here. But I do not think this is the first step. And I hear people saying, well, classes are too small. I'm not an educator, so I can only tell you what overcrowded classes are. 20 kids in a class, I wish I had had that in elementary school. I was 35 to 45 kids in the class. And I think that what I heard people say last time who moved in is that the value of having smaller classes. If you take a look at our neighbors who can afford to send their school, the kids who want to send their school to Orchard Valley and stuff, they're paying a lot of money to send their kids to small classes. So I just underline that I think if you make a choice to close this school now without focusing on some of the other moving parts that are happening in the next year or two, it's going to be a mistake, and it'll be opposed by a lot of us. And listen, I've been paying taxes for schools budgets, and I've never had a kid go to this school because I believe in the value of what we have here. So I think that's the underlying point for me why I've been bothered coming out tonight this week.
I was just going to echo the same thing. We moved here 2 years ago from Ohio. We have 4 young-ish children, and we chose Calais because it's a small community with a small school. We came from a suburb outside Columbus, Ohio, where 5,000 kids in the district, 27 to 32 kids per classroom. And we chose to come here because it was a safe place and because we liked the small school. We knew our kids were going to get a better education because there was more interaction from teacher to student. As a speech therapist in a public school setting for the last 18 years, I have a lot of insight on how the public education system works and what's best for students. And I think the elephant in the room is what really comes down to is cost, and what we're talking about is our taxes and the finances. So the issue of keeping Calais open isn't about our academics, because our kids are performing well in the district. It's about the cost of keeping Calais open. So what can we do as a community, or better yet, as a state, to bring down property taxes to help keep communities in Vermont? Because that's what's attracting young families. We're not looking for big cities, we're looking for a sense of community and our children to be able to belong and to feel like they're a part of something and not lost in the crowd. So how do we then, as a community, support our school and keep it financially viable so that we can keep it open and, as you said, attract young families? Because I think that's the growth pattern that we're going to be going towards. And I say that as someone leaving a state that, was overpopulated and wasn't going the direction I wanted it to. And we're one family of many families looking for a place like Calais. So I think that's my question, is how is closing Calais then, I guess the ultimate goal is then to cut the cost of taxes, or is it going to cut our taxes?
So
is that the idea?
Speaking only for myself, that's not the reason to do it.
Okay, I agree, totally.
I'd like to tag on just that I started more than 20 years ago in a small school similar size to Calais as a teacher, and then I moved from there after 12 years to a really large school in our state, and made a choice that for me was really important, which was to come back to a small school. And the sense of community that a small school provides for our students isn't like what larger schools do. They just don't. It's easier to lose students in a larger population a group of kids. As a teacher, it would have been a whole lot easier for me to stay in a larger school. I can get really lost in that system and not be as noticed or as pointed out or called upon. And so coming here was a conscious choice of mine. I knew I'd have to work harder, but the sense of community that a small school brings had a lot more value to me than a larger school system. I really think it's important to keep this small community school. And it's not honestly that small compared to some other local community schools either. We have grown a lot. We've been fortunate to bring a lot of, having our new principal has brought a lot of new families into our school. And I think that that growth is going to continue as we see folks moving in.
Rick? Yeah, and just to reiterate what I was just saying, my wife and I have been here for about 35 years. We've been in Calais since about 1999. We chose Calais through this system. And they were, my triplets were starting kindergarten. We looked at every school within 25 or 30 miles of Montpelier. We chose this community because of the school. In fact, we always, even before kids, we measured a community based on its school. We would call principals and we would talk to school board members. And you can judge a community by that. Many people do this. So, you know, it wouldn't have been a consideration if there wasn't a school. That would, and so I think if you want to draw families, which we do, we need balanced communities. This is not the way to do it. You know, that's.
I want to jump in because I'm a little bit on the opposite side of the spectrum. I'm also new to this community. I have 2 kids also in the same grades as Daniel does. And to me, some of the challenges that the small school is facing is actually a deterrent to me for our family and for our kids. And in fact, like the model of potentially having 3 elementary schools and bringing these students over to, our students over to East Montpelier potentially has a lot of opportunity for my kids. That's what I'm seeing. I see opportunity for athletics. I see opportunity for having a librarian in the school full-time. I have an opportunity for a full-time nurse, opportunity for expanded art program, opportunity for music classes, for potentially a chorus or a band, things that we cannot offer in the current model right now.
We actually have those.
Right, and so I feel like my kids are missing out on things that they could be experiencing now in 1st grade and in 4th grade that they are not currently getting at Calais for no fault of Calais or for the teaching staff or for anybody here who's doing an incredible job. But I think that we are being short-sighted about the potential opportunity that this could bring to our community. And this is the conversation. I'm sorry?
Does East Montpelier have band?
Yes, they do.
Kindergarten to
Yes.
6th grade.
I'm not there, I'm here, so I know what my kids aren't getting.
Well, that's what I'm just wondering, like, are those opportunities, do those opportunities that you want exist
Yes,
at East Montpelier?
they do exist. And in other schools, there's language learning, and there's other things that are taking place that aren't taking place here.
There's not language learning. Just
Well, there has been in the past. But all to say that I think the conversation around can we imagine what the opportunities are and could be is really important to this conversation. And we're focusing a lot on the past and, you know, why this is not the right direction to go. And I would like to flip it on its head and say, what can we think about that if we do go down this path, if this is the direction that potentially is coming down on us from the higher aboves at the state level and other things, how can we imagine it better?
But Anna, this is a listening session.
And I am listening, but I'm also having an opportunity to speak, and we really did thoughtfully develop these questions in a way to try and like have a broader conversation and not just everybody sitting around saying, these are all the reasons why it shouldn't work.
The integrity police are not going to come and get you if you venture a guess as to how this might be better and still vote against it, okay? You're still going to be allowed to vote against it. You can offer 15 ways in which this is going to destroy our town. I challenge you all to come up with one way in which it might be better.
Place is just outside.
Luke.
The question, though, that that's being posed to us is what our concerns are. So since we're still on that question. Sure. Big concern for me is, I'm looking at, we've already discussed taxes. Like, are we going to get a break on taxes? No. Nope, that's not going to happen. Are we going to get better student outcomes? I think it's really, really subjective. But if you look at our students today and their test scores, they have great test scores. Do I expect my kids are going to have better test scores if they go to East Montpelier? No. And maybe I could be convinced that they would be better. But as of right now, going from a school that's rural with a small school that my daughter can go talk to the principal when she feels like she has an issue, like, you can't convince me that we're going to have better test scores overall if we move to East Montpelier. Here's where I think this thing is really short-sighted, though. With Act 73 and the fact that all of these school districts are going to change anyway, why are we rearranging the deck chairs between these schools when we've got schools like Plainfield, Marshfield, other schools that could be fantastic candidates to join Calais in the future? Maybe even Woodbury, right? We're operating on a model that is, I feel like, just rearranging deck chairs for what's in front of us right now, not looking at what's going to happen when all of these school districts change. So that's my big concern, is that we're spending all this time getting all worked up about how are we going to get these schools to close, and it's the wrong conversation to have right now.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Doug.
Yeah.
Sorry.
This is not a concern, sorry. I know you have like questions. It's really just a question because and it might be too detailed for you all to be able to answer, but I think for me, sometimes it's a question of like, what will this one thing be like? Not it'll be worse or it'll be better, but what is it going to be like? So I have 2 children that are developmentally delayed and also have learning disabilities. And so, sorry, I'm emotional about this. So my question is just like, how will the special education and also like other services for these types of children change? Or will it not change? And maybe you don't know that, but like specific things would be like, if there's a certain number of like staff, FTE right now dedicated to that at Calais, will it be the same? Well, if you see who's doing it at East Montpelier, who's doing it at Calais, if they combine, will it still be the same? A number of people with the same number of hours helping the same number of children? Right. Or will there be less support, or will there be more? Right. Is there some advantage there? So you might not have an answer to that question, but I just want that question to be included in this conversation. I think there's other parents like me who can't be here because it's really hard when you have kids with challenges and, excuse me, it's not always easy to come and represent yourself, so hopefully I'm also representing other children and parents.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. It's definitely worth acknowledging there are a lot of voices that aren't in the room and aren't able to express themselves, and I think that's something we challenge ourselves at the school board to do as much as possible, is to acknowledge who might not have a voice in a room. I have thoughts on your question, and I'd probably defer to Stephen to give a more specific answer, but I think one big challenge of this has been, Gillian put it really well, that this is a traumatic conversation for all of us, and I think one of the groups it's most traumatic for is teachers and staff, and what Gillian pointed out was that until the board is unequivocally moving forward with this, she did not want us to get into a lot of the details about like what a structure will look like and how staff will be affected. And I fully respect that point of view. It's also frustrating because so many people, both on the board, on the configuration committee, and in the public want to understand what it looks like. I also feel like the debate is, it's hard to have when you have the status quo and then you have a nebulous future that you're proposing and you're not able to give specifics. But I really appreciate the question, and I don't know if you want to speak specifically to special ed.
The quick and short answer is that our staffing will meet the needs of our kids. If they're, for special education in particular, we're required to staff in an appropriate way. And I don't want to say too much that it sounds like it's negative in any way, but Calais right now is served by one special educator who has to cover the entire range of services and grade levels within the school. Not an easy task. And so support for students falls only on her. And then if you have more students, you have larger staff, which can specialize a little bit more and can meet those needs. So there are different staffing models for a larger school than for a smaller school based on those student needs. And I would give a specific example because we've talked about it a couple of times. Nursing. Nursing is something that is greatly reduced at our smaller schools right now as a cost containment and as a service need. But we do have a school that has a student with high needs, and where we would normally have a nurse for part-time, we have a full-time nurse to meet those needs. So we do meet those needs when necessary. And there are staffing models around special education that we would follow to make sure that every kid receives the services that they need.
Yeah, so I kind of want to go back, combination question here. So I want to go back to what you were talking about with like the benefits and enhanced opportunities. But I was also trying to understand why that would occur. Like, why would you have more teachers? Would all of the teachers from here, I know you don't want to get into specifics, but I'm trying to see how.
I do want to get into specifics.
Yeah, we really do want to get into specifics.
I would love to hear how that works out. Like, say you were to close this school, maybe all the teachers go to the other school, maybe they don't. You have an increased class size. How do the opportunities grow? Is it funding related? If so, how would that be different than maybe needing less teachers at a smaller school? Is like the funding kind of equitable?
Yeah. I think a big piece of it is trying to minimize the fluctuation from year to year and the grade size from year to year. I'm not an expert, and I think we need to look at this in the next iteration of this conversation as a full board more critically, but I don't anticipate like a big fluctuation in one direction or another in terms of the faculty. I guess that's what I would say. I don't know, Stephen, you want to?
I would say that our budgeting process really looks at what kind of staffing do you need based upon the students and the student needs. So it's the number of students and the needs of those students, and we try to match our budgeting and therefore our staffing, because staffing is 80% of our budget. We try to meet the needs of our kids, and that's been our model for last year and this year, is just how do we equitably assign money to kids based upon their needs so that we have the staff necessary to support those kids. In smaller schools, what happens many times is that some of the support positions are part-time positions, and those are harder to staff and they're harder to maintain. And so we're looking at where are the options for us to be able to have full-time staff as part of this as well. One of many considerations in how we structure the school.
So you're saying by combining schools, you essentially would get more full-time staff, which would enable more programming?
So school counselors aren't necessarily full-time. I think it is here, but it's also double duty. And so having a full-time school nurse, full-time school counselor, being able to have speech and language pathologists that comes to one building instead of having to go to 3. Those are the kinds of things that can happen when the school is a little bit larger than it is.
Our teacher is similar, where she's covering 3 schools, and if we had fewer elementary schools, likely would be able to. She is full-time.
I don't know which position.
The art teacher.
We have an art teacher.
Speak under correction. That's what it would be arguably a more robust curriculum offered if she were in a single place. Still full-time, but in a single place. That's another example. Yeah, Mac.
So my concern is that, when the legislature passed Act 46, they did a study and they found that, academic outcomes didn't follow school size. And so the whole argument of consolidating schools to improve schools, kind of that whole argument went away. And so the big argument for Act 46 was that, well, there's going to be more opportunity for kids in bigger schools. And now we are, what, 10 years later, and we see exactly that the academics haven't improved. In fact, academics have gone down. And so this whole promise of this consolidating of schools is going to provide all these extra opportunities for kids, and that we're going to have better outcomes or better equity. Equity has not improved with consolidation. So my concern is we're and you're saying there's not going to be any financial improvement, so it's kind of like, I don't see, I don't see why I would be for this. I'm really concerned that, this whole consolidation thing and the whole argument that we're going to have extra programming and we're doing all these other wonderful things. It didn't happen 10 years ago. What's going to make it happen this time? I just don't, my money, I want to see academic improvement. I want to see equity. I want to see kids that are, have disabilities are, show improvement, that, our math scores start improving, those kind of things. And this whole idea.
I was going to ask what kind of evidence you'd like to see, but.
I don't know. You're promising these things, but you're not giving us details because you don't want to be detailed. I don't know. I'm just really concerned about that. And, I really have concerns about taking 6th graders up to U32. I mean, we just had a teacher there giving marijuana away, and it's just kind of like, I want my 6th graders exposed to this? No, I'm just really opposed to that. I just think, those kids are young, and I just know when they get to U32, U32 has a drug problem. I don't need to have my kids exposed to that any earlier than they are now. So I just have a lot of concerns about this. I just, this promise of extra opportunities, well, that's great for maybe the top 1%, but what about the kids at the bottom 1%? They're not getting extra help. They're not getting extra, our scores for kids with disabilities is poor. I'm really concerned about that. And I really, my money, I want to see improved academics, not improved opportunities. It just doesn't, I don't buy it.
Thank you.
Callie.
I guess I have a question, suggestion, I guess. So I totally hear what Anna's saying, offering, having more accessibility and being able to offer, totally agree, full-time nurse, having, I know we have a huge band program here, it's the biggest in the district and most heavily attended, which is awesome. But is there a way that band can be provided every day or art every day or whatever it may be that makes it more, students have more access to extracurriculars or to those outside things? What is the number we need to have in the building to meet that full-time staff is a question that I have. And I don't know that we know that answer, and that's fine, but I would pose that to the configuration committee. And then my second thought is, in our previous district, our students were intra-district transfers. So our home elementary building, because we both are educators, we couldn't put them on the bus. So we intra-district transferred, still in our school district, but it went from our home elementary school to the elementary school that was right beside my intermediate school, and the school board allowed us to do that, but I had to transport, obviously. Has the district considered allowing intra-district transfers? There are students in East Montpelier who maybe want to come to Calais, or vice versa. Parents want to send kids from Calais to East Montpelier, or wherever. I just wonder if that's an idea to maybe shift some of these numbers around so that it is more dispersed, and instead of cramming them all in one building. I don't know if that's an option, but it worked really well in our previous district. And transportation wasn't provided, so busing wasn't impacted at all. It actually helped our busing.
Thanks. Yeah, I think also, just to reiterate something you said, to extend on it, I don't think, in our last configuration committee meeting, we talked a little bit about this. And maybe there is some theoretical optimum where every position is full-time, and that's not maybe a realistic number. It's not what we're striving for. And I think we voted for this model because we think it's a significant improvement on the status quo. Obviously, that's debatable. We have an opportunity to debate tonight, and we will have more opportunities. But we acknowledge it's not a silver bullet. I think it allows us more flexibility and more resilience for the future, but it's not going to solve every problem. And I'm sorry if I suggested that I was promising anything. I'm not promising anything. But based on what I've heard about an expanded middle school model and larger elementary schools with more robust services available as a realistic probability, let's say, for the future, I chose this model over the status quo, and I asked to move forward with it. And I reserve the right, when I see more details, to change my vote. But that's where I am now. Yeah.
I'd like to respond to Anna's suggestion to really try to think of a positive. If you close Calais and Doty, then that's it, it's resolved. And I really feel for the teachers in those schools and the uncertainty that they've been living with for 10 years. Yeah. And a little bit, it's reflected in all of us. It's a schools we were our property values, if it happens. So it would, if you get this resolved, then that stress on the teachers and the rest of us would go away.
That is a potential benefit. Hopefully it would.
Thank you.
That's
very thoughtful.
Could you tell us, you said you voted?
So the configuration committee voted to advance this proposal. We asked Stephen and the district leadership to put the proposal together. We voted to advance it to the full school board. The full school board has not yet taken it up. I am on the full school board, but I'm up here as a representative with Anna of the configuration committee. That's right.
And at the last meeting that was held here,
Yeah.
you couldn't get a full vote of everybody to support that.
That's right.
So I guess I missed something in between. I have two thoughts.
You missed my introduction, Barry.
I did. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
There, I think I'll send you an email with a summary of the ways in which I view this process as different from last year, accepting and acknowledging the fact that we landed on the same conclusion. But I do think there are important ways in which it was different. And
you voted at that meeting. You voted to close the school. Both of you voted to close the school.
I voted to put it. It was board only, and I voted to put it to voters. Yes.
Okay. So will this go to voters before at some point?
It's for the board to decide.
I thought it was state law.
Yeah.
If it moves forward, for sure, the voters will get a say, but the board may choose not to move forward.
Right, because there's the confusion with the meeting last time was it wasn't clear what people were voting for. The vote last time was to put it on the ballot for a decision. That was not communicated well to the general public, for sure. And so there was a lot of confusion coming into that conversation about why people were even in the room in the first place. So it's good clarification, but it also was to put it on the ballot, not to close the school.
Thank you. When I left the last meeting, I thought there was a group of people who were going to get together. Just use an example. The elementary school I went to, which is still an inner city school, couldn't afford a library, couldn't afford a lot of things. And they had an alumni association, all people who went there over for 100 years of the school. They put new books in the library staffed by community members. We have an incredible talent in Calais. Yeah. Some of you don't know, we probably have more musicians and artists and et cetera. People who deal with food, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And I was, not having kids, I'm not that involved here anymore. But it still seemed to me that some of the things you're talking about, we could put into this community, where people like you with food or me with energy, we could be coming here and doing stuff with kids at no cost to anybody. And I really think we should look at that. I really think it's a mistake, as I've said before, but I don't know how the community would go if you put it to a vote, but it definitely should go to a vote. It should not be done by just all of you who put a lot of time in, but the community has a lot of different feelings. cross feelings, and I can understand yours too, so I appreciate you sharing that.
Sure.
Thanks, Dave.
I would like to add, though, that, you know, Jared can speak to this as the principal here. I mean, there is an invitation to community members to come in and provide any opportunity to share their expertise with our kids. And that exists. And so I don't know how many people are actually doing that in this room and coming here and, you know, taking advantage of those opportunities, but it is available.
Drop by anytime?
That's a question for the principal. That's not in my pay grade.
What I'm
but-
saying is if the community is aware that a certain skill is sought,
That's a great
then
question.
it's easier to respond
Yeah,
rather
a
than.
more pointed request. Yeah.
Understood.
Exactly.
Mark?
Oh, sorry, Cindy. We've got a
Oh,
couple
Mark
people.
and then
Mark,
Cindy.
Cindy, and then Ainsley, I know also had her hand raised.
So a process question, because you talked a little bit about process, and I know this is probably going to sound like we're getting way ahead of ourselves, but if there's a vote this year, we're not that far away from it.
That's true.
And I would just ask that if there is a vote, if it does go to voters this year, that it goes to town meeting, not a different time. We vote on town meeting. Like I pulled the numbers this week, because I know who to ask for the numbers. And on school-related votes that don't happen on town meeting day, roughly 20% of the voting eligible public votes. When we vote on town meeting day, twice that percentage votes. So if this matters to our community, then we need to vote on town meeting day, not on a different day.
I 100% agree with you.
November election, they said 60%.
Cindy.
I wanted to say I sent to Front Porch Forum 4 or 5 really specific questions, and I came here hoping to find answers, and I'd like to hear them before we're done, and I see our time is running short.
Yeah, I mean, we're not prepared to answer these questions tonight, Cindy, unfortunately. I have noted your questions, and we will circle back with them, but we came with a specific set of questions that we were tasked to put out to the community, and we will have to come back to them in the future.
But you haven't gone through the questions you wanted to, have
Well,
you?
no, we haven't.
We have.
Right.
And I think one other point is some of them relate directly to finances, which was not in the scope of the configuration committee's reasons it considered adopting this proposal. I think that, I read your questions and I love your questions and I thank you for submitting them. And I don't want to lose sight of them, so let's connect and make sure they get answered.
I don't want them answered privately, I want them to be answered for the community. I think
Yeah.
they're questions I hear in the community. Pardon?
So Stephen said they'll be part of our budgeting
They'll be part of our
process.
budgeting process
Okay.
to model those skills. And I saw your questions as well. We're working on those as part of our budget process.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry about suggesting that they answer them, if we answer them privately. I'm not in a position to answer them.
Got it.
So Ainsley,
Oh, Ainsley.
My question in part has been answered, but I'm a little confused about potential timelines. I'm wondering if you can speak more to that and how there will be more, or it sounds like you're saying there will be more opportunity for community involvement along this process, so I'm just wondering what that may look like.
Yeah, so obviously the board debates this in open session and public input is welcome at every board meeting. We meet on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. This month, in lieu of our first Wednesday board meeting, we're having these listening sessions. That's sort of opportunity number one. I think that, you know, as I said, like we don't have the level of detail about what this would look like in implementation that we want yet, because the administration is sort of waiting for an unequivocal response from the board that yes, they do want to see that before they go ahead with that. So that will have to be laid out before voters consider it as well. I'm trying to think of other opportunities for input.
The board steering committee is going to be talking about adding additional board meetings for configuration conversations as well.
Okay, and then I guess a follow-up, so looping back around to the timeline.
Yeah.
If, hypothetically, if this goes to vote at, say, town meeting day, should we expect to see these changes for our students next year? Because that's giving students very little time to prepare.
And the district very little time to prepare.
Yeah.
It's a great question. It's a great point. And before this week, I would have said, much to Mark's disappointment, that we were looking at like a January vote for this.
I know, that's my take.
And the reason for that is not to rush things and to have low turnout. The reason for that is to have a long runway for implementation, or as long as possible. And in that scenario, at least speaking for myself, I was envisioning implementation next fall. It's obviously not for me to decide. I'm a single board member and I can't act unilaterally. But I think my guess is that we're going to have a long runway, and that will definitely have to be clearly answered before the board votes and before voters vote. That's a non-answer, Ainsley, and I'm sorry.
I appreciate
Julie's up.
Couple quick things to go back to question number 2, although I think we've only gotten to question number 2. Has the bus route been practiced? Like you said that there was estimated time, so has it been practiced? No, okay. And is there a reason why these questions didn't go out beforehand? I'm just wondering if people would have been more prepared to get through them if they went out beforehand, or maybe at the next listening session, if there's going to be one, go
I
out
think
beforehand?
that's very well taken.
Because I'm halfway through and I really want to hear the questions, but
Yeah,
also
and
have so much to say.
And I'm happy to read them. I think, I don't know if I think the survey asks all of these questions. We're gonna have an online listening session, which is more of the same, but, you know, we could get the questions in full out, prior to that as well. And I'm happy to share you my copy, but.
The questions were, though, posted on Front Porch Forum a couple times, because Elizabeth, you posted them, didn't you? Okay, so, yes, the questions were out there. I don't know the channels in which there's so many ways that people receive their information in town and beyond, so it's very hard to have just one line of getting information out there, so maybe some feedback from you guys could be, how do you want to receive information? What's the best way to get that communication out to folks outside of Front Porch Forum, outside of maybe emails or other things like that? Because I struggle with this. I lead multiple organizations around Calais. I'm very involved in the community outside of configuration, and I also struggle with getting what we're doing for those other organizations out to the broader population. And I would love to have more people know about what we're doing, and I try and work all of the channels that I know of, but I feel like I don't know them all. So that would be really helpful feedback in general.
My last one really quick, and this might be something you can't answer now, so I'm happy to parking lot it, but is this the only configuration you guys have talked about? Have you talked about just closing one school versus 2 schools? Has there been any other discussion besides the plan that everybody was against last year? Not everybody, I'm sorry, not everybody.
We did look at other proposals, yeah. Another thing we could have done better at, and fortunately we have ample opportunity between now and when voters vote to do this, is to share out in really clear terms what our criteria we were looking at were. Frankly, based on the criteria, which is our list of priorities for what we want to see for our students in our district, we felt that this model was by far the best version that met the most criteria in the most robust way. And without visuals, I can't give you like a more comprehensive answer in this moment, but yes, we did consider other.
Can we take like 2 seconds to just read the questions, because then maybe people can swap around?
I just have a clarification for you. This is a listening session, so but Daniel, with all due respect, what I'm hearing is you've already decided what the configuration committee is proposing. So you have a conclusion already, and you're asking us for input when the conclusion's already been faced. And in all my years, that's not usually a good way to do a listening session.
It's duly noted. I struggled for the right term for this evening. I think of it as a listening session because Michelle and Elizabeth are here. They're 2 board members who were not directly involved in this process. They're listening to the feedback from the public. I'm listening to the feedback from the public. I'm only one person. I can only make one decision at a time. But I think the important thing to remember is that it's early in the process still. And yes, the configuration committee did say this is worth discussion by the full board. This is worth consideration by the full board. And this is an opportunity for the public to give feedback.
Yeah, but you're saying.
Hold on.
This isn't a point of clarification at this point, though, Barry. There are a lot of hands up.
I understand that, but you're saying you're gonna have a vote in January.
No, I don't think we are. I said that before this week, that was what I was thinking might happen, and I don't think that's the case anymore. But I can't give you a clearer answer. Samantha?
Yeah. Right, I always regret speaking at these things, so if I'm not like saying the best things, I'm gonna be like, oh, I shouldn't have talked later on. But I'm the 5th grade teacher here, and I'm gonna speak to sending the 5th graders as like to their 6th grade year at U32 next fall. Sorry. I also have a 5th grader and a 7th grader who go to Montpelier schools, so I kind of live this parallel life of a 5th grade parent of a child in a big school and a 5th grade teacher of children in a small school, and every day I experience both. And Montpelier's a little different. He transitioned to Main Street this year, 4th to 5th grade. And one thing that is very, very clear to me, because he receives some extra support, he does have an IEP, like he gets extra support, is that the receiving school, in my professional opinion, needs to be very, very, very prepared to receive the incoming students. And so to me, as the 5th grade teacher thinking about my class going to U32 next year, not that U32 wouldn't do a great job, the timeline just seems very, very, very short for them. They haven't transitioned to a different classroom in a few years. They've been with me for a few years, which is, amazing in and of itself. But I just think that the school that's taking in the students that are coming to them needs to have its classrooms ready. It needs to have its teachers dialed in. It needs to have its support services dialed in, its scheduling dialed in, its extra programming dialed in. And so to me, the timeline just seems really, really short for creating a 6th grade program. I don't know if that's like how it would really work out, but it just feels that way to me as the 5th grade teacher. And then also just watching my own child go through 5th grade in a big school, and my daughter already went through 5th grade. I don't see him accessing more things than the Calais children access in their small school. And like for every 10 things he might experience in a big school, I could name 10 things at Calais that these children experience that he doesn't get to experience in a big school because of the ratio. So I would say he probably accesses the library just as much as the Calais kids access the library because of how many children are in the school and how many library classes there are and how many PE classes there are for accessing the gym, and he has PE twice a week and art once a week, and it's a really similar experience. It's just way more kids. So it kind of comes down to like what you're like. I think what you personally value. There's a lot of really, really beautiful, amazing things that happen at Calais all day long that he doesn't get to do. So his opportunities are different than what the Calais students' opportunities are. Ironically, my daughter played Onion River soccer last spring, and I drove her from Montpelier to Doty to play soccer. So I drove 30 minutes to Doty for my Montpelier child soccer. And so I just think that it's not as clear cut, it's not as black and white. I don't necessarily think that big means more and small means less. I just think we really have to look at, kind of like when you make a pro and con list, and you're like, oh, but I like my these two on this list better than these 10 on this list. And just kind of thinking about what that programming is, what those opportunities are, and is it really more at a bigger school. I don't know. Sorry, now I regret talking.
I have a question. We know that the state is coming down with some expectations around redistricting supervisory unions, and I wonder how the reconfiguration committee has taken that into account, because that was already creating some anxiety for me as a teacher and a community member, and knowing that there was change coming, and then all of a sudden to be sideswiped by, hey, you might get another change too, really feels very overwhelming. So how has the committee really paid attention to the changes that are going to be expected in the next year or two from the state, as well as now being suggested that we are changing in a small community here?
So we talked a little bit about like testing and stuff in the scores, but Calais has such a beautiful position in where we are, and for me, I value Vermont culture more than athletics, and that Vermonters are known for their work ethic across the nation. Like, they will be hired on the spot. So schools had fewer students, but like Calais, I don't know if I would send my kids to East Montpelier.
Could you just stay in one place?
For a second. My kids would go to East Montpelier. I don't want them in the Fairmont corn monster industry. If there was one school that was on this flag, it would be Calais Elementary.
Yeah, so just to address Laurel's question, I think that the school board is paying, I don't want to say paying more attention, spending more time talking about the implications of the new legislation than the configuration committee is, but the configuration committee is aware of what that legislation might mean, and there's still a lot of ambiguity, and it's very upsetting. But it seems pretty clear, the message seems pretty clear that there's going to be a lot more pressure put on elementary schools that are not sort of mid to large sized elementary schools by Vermont standards, and sort of all.
Every school.
It's a lot of
There's
schools.
like 3 or 4 schools in Vermont that are like up near 1,000, but most schools are much considerably similar size, I think, to Calais.
Yeah.
So it just makes me wonder where that will land.
Yeah.
And the multiple changes that you're asking the communities and staff and students to go through, with the possibility of being required to do that in the next few years through the state. That is just an overwhelming feeling.
Mm-hmm.
But I think too that some of this is a response to trying to get ahead of some of that for our community and think about some of these things that might be imposed on us and try and maybe configure ourselves in a way that we would be set up to counteract some other things coming down the pike via Act 73 around size of schools.
By assuming that you know what the state's going to expect, instead of waiting,
they have
because
thrown the
isn't that
number of
coming?
150 students as the threshold for a school to be closed.
Isn't that's coming, the information is coming this summer though, right? It hasn't actually been officially decided, or is that not true?
I think it's going to the legislature when they open, and then it'll be discussed by the legislature. No decision has been made. There's supposed to be 3 big plans, and I think the plans are out there, but they're still being debated, and they're short on details. While I'm speaking of short on details, from the time this has first been discussed, I'm hearing Calais and Doty, kill those schools. And I don't understand where that came from. That was one of the questions on my list. If you're vague on all these details, how can you have decided which 2 schools to close, and why?
So, city semantics are important. No one says kill those schools, first of all. And so well, yeah, I understand some people feel that way, and also you're putting words into our mouth, and that those were words that we did not use. I think another important perspective that I have is that all 5 elementary schools are effectively being closed, and they were reorganizing with 3 new schools. And I realize people see a very profound difference between East Montpelier's facility staying open and being the new school for these 2 towns, and the Calais facility closing and these students going over there. But it would be if this were to move forward, it'd be incredibly important for me, speaking just for myself, that every student felt like they were on an equal footing. And that's why the transition is so important, because it's people were talking in our configuration committee in terms of a rebranding, which I'm not comfortable with that term, because, well, I don't like the term. But I think that the school really needs to feel like home for every student. And I think it's going to feel very different for East Montpelier kids, just like it's going to feel different for Calais kids. But back to your question about why those schools, I think a lot of it came down to geography, and it came down to what felt logical in terms of bus routes, and it came down to facility size and the 3 facilities that felt like that they could absorb the extra students. That was why we zeroed in on those schools. Yeah.
I've sat through these conversations in the Harwood district, and they've talked about closing schools there for years as well. And what we were presented with numerous times from committees such as you was your thought processes. And we took all the 5 elementary schools, and we talked about closing this one and this one and this one and this. You know, they gave us all of the scenarios and what it would look like closing Crosset Brook, turning that into an elementary and merging 2 schools. I mean, they gave us the information for all of the scenarios so that we were well educated and well informed. This is my first meeting here, but it doesn't sound like people have been given that kind of information. If we're not sure why it's Calais and Doty, and did you look at closing East Montpelier? Did you look at closing Berlin? Like, have you really looked at all the situations to come up with this? Because geography, I mean, they're dealing with people from Stowe Line to Face, you know, like that's a huge geographical area, and they were able to provide a lot of detail and a lot of information that really made the taxpayers much more well-informed.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing, if I could reframe this in terms of feedback, is that you want to see more information before you make a decision. Thank you.
It's my understanding that we've seen this over the past few years. I've seen all these versions. They've given that out during board meetings, if you read the board notes, or if you attend the board meetings. And so
well, as a new resident, you know,
so like, yes. But for people, if you have, I've seen them. But I have questions about the budgeting process, because we're hitting the budgeting season for the district. And if we're talking about closing a school, or schools, right? Like what happens, how does that process work? How are they making a budget if they don't know if we're closing a school or not?
The proverbial day.
So right now, our first budget and foundational budget is if the district is configured exactly as it is right now in terms of the schools and the school populations that we're expecting. We're also running a budget model that says, okay, what happens if how do we model this proposal in a budget as well? And so we should be able to put those side by side to be able to show what they look like in terms of their staffing, the budget, all of those pieces, because our budget model is tied directly to our staffing.
I think, like, my question is because we've had budget cuts for as long as I've worked in this district, right? And at some point, we have to admit that something's going to get cut, right? And if that means, like, certain things aren't required in elementary schools. Like, they don't have to give you art in elementary school or music. And me as a parent, I want my kids to have those things. And if that means that the best model is to combine the schools so that my kids have access to those things, then I will deal with closing the school. I like this school. I think Jared does an amazing job, and I would hate to see it happen. But the reality is that the opportunities for our kids are not going to be there if we keep waiting.
We're just going to pause for a second. I want to follow up on a couple things you mentioned, Christine. One is in terms of resources. So the state puts out ed quality standards. I think a lot of people, including myself, have issues with those ed quality standards. They're insufficient in a lot of ways in terms of the resources they provide schools. We have district quality standards that are better and also not perfect. And Christine is right. I wouldn't wish that any of you would have to come to every one of our meetings and every one of our configuration meetings. All of those minutes and all the presentations we see are available on our website. So in that respect, Christine's correct. And also, there was a discussion last year about our process and why we landed on the proposal we did. I anticipate we will have a similar explanation when the time comes this time around, because I hear what you're saying very much. Before any more comments, though, I want to come back to what Julie said and read the rest of the questions, because we won't get to them, but I want people's brains moving in that direction, and there are a lot of strong opinions in here, and so I want to make sure that people who don't get the opportunity to provide input on these will have the opportunity in written form or at the virtual listening session to do so. So maybe I'll read the first four and you can read the next four?
Sure. Or
Okay.
five,
So, what feels most challenging about creating multi-town elementary schools? If a closure of a school facility happens and a multi-town school were to replace a town school, what should we emphasize in building new school communities? How can we help our new multi-town school communities grow, connect, and thrive? What would help families and community members feel real ownership and pride in a new multi-town school? And what would help students feel comfortable, welcome, and at home in a new multi-town school?
And then the last couple are, what would make sixth grade students feel welcome and ready to move to U32 middle school? What could the district do to address concerns and make this transition easier for all families? Are there any things that you'd like to share as we move through this process? Which I think we're already there with that. Yeah, it's a few. Hi, Debbie.
So I understand that the process is talking about this one, the intention is that we're talking about this one idea, but for the larger conversation, I just want to go back to what this woman who's gone now said about the potential of having like some kind of open, like if it was even just in our district or even just within two schools, like I know there are families that are in East Montpelier that would like their kids to go to Calais because they feel like their kids would benefit from the little bit smaller size and maybe some of the other things that Calais is appreciated for. And I think there's some families in Calais who want their kids to go to East Montpelier. And so I guess I just want that to be part of the conversation. I don't know how all that works and, but is that an option possibly? Does that make sense? Is that something that's feasible? So
yeah, it sounds like it would be a district policy change. And there are 3 board members in the room who just heard your comment, so okay. Thank you. Yeah. Rick?
Yeah, I would say, have you ever looked, and I already know the answer to this with the board for years, and have you ever looked at building, a single elementary, you're talking about at the U32 campus, a lot of advantages to that, access to Route 14, access to County Road for transportation, a little bit farther, much better road access.
Good roads.
But there's cost there, but, ultimately just merging all of them. And then, you're running one facility instead of 4. The cost savings would be massive. They would pay for a facility pretty fast. And they didn't do that. I was in the East Montpelier school. 2 years before consolidation, they did that. They deferred maintenance on that building. I was asked to look at that, and I worked for buildings general services for the state. I manage hundreds of buildings. So, and a friend in East Montpelier said, you know, what's going on? We've got this massive bond going on, you know, to repair the school. They had deferred maintenance for years. And they, as every other town, they had a falling student population in that school, about 1% a year. That was the average at that time. But they added a huge capacity, something like 90 seats in that school when they built it. Half of Agency of Education lived in East Montpelier. They actually knew consolidation was coming, and I know because I heard the conversations in the back room as I was kind of looking into this quietly. And, you know, that idea that let's build a school so we become the center and we'll close some other school in the town, that was a little irritating to me. So if you want to really, you know, instead of saying, oh, let's go to East Montpelier, let's look at where the hub is to actually equalize transportation, and let's build a school there where it makes sense, or go to the high school and say, okay, if we're decreasing student populations and ultimately we're going to have to keep closing schools, let's go to a single facility, put them at the high school, transition to high school becomes much easier then because there's actually already interaction. We've got the acreage in the facility there. You know, a lot of things get worked out. But that idea was ignored because there's a lot of money in East Montpelier. And at that time, you know, guess what the two poorest towns in our district were? Calais and Worcester. So you're talking Calais and Doty. And yet, our students were outperforming. We were top performers in the district, and we had the lowest cost per pupil because we managed our schools very well. And that's prior to consolidation. We had a Calais school board. We sat in front of the townspeople every year, and we had, those of us who observed, you know, we really were careful with how we spent. And you know what? We had music programs, art programs, and we worked hard to maintain those. That's what the people wanted, and we did it. And we did it with fiscal constraint, you know, so with consolidation, that has kind of gone out the window. Costs have spiraled up, accountability has gone down, and it has in every other state that did that. We went, talked to the state of Maine. They were the last ones before Vermont did this. They said, I talked to 5 towns. 60% of the towns were already pulling out of consolidation, and they were all the small towns because their costs spiraled up and their accountability went to nothing. And there was a study by the University of Maine that talked about why that failed. And so, you know, with cost, the cost piece is a myth. That doesn't say money, it costs money. So what are we doing here? If you want people to buy into this, then you better not just start saying, okay, we're going to give this to the wealthy community and give them even more advantage. Let's really look at where that school needs to be to give equity. Let's build one. And or put it at the high school. I mean, I know I tell you right now, that 4-minute rule, that's bullshit. And I know that from my transportation background. It is not 4 minutes different. So, but a location like that would give you arteries on both sides of the mountain ridges, you know, 14, Route 2, and then you've got, you know, the county road that would, paved roads that would actually give decent access and safer access. It would save there are a lot of facilities that are already there. It would save, your busing facilities would work. With scheduling would probably even work because the elementary schools and the high school do not align just because we use the same buses now. So, I mean, I would say, you know, if you're going to look at this model, let's look at a model that really would solve the problem and not just do.
Thanks.
You know,
Thanks for that history.
Yeah.
I just wanted to pick up on one thing you said related to the U32 facility, and for those who haven't followed closely the configuration committee's work, one thing we did was we were the sort of committee with jurisdiction to really closely examine that study that was done about merging Montpelier Roxbury with U32. And so that study was done this year, and we looked at it, and I speak under correction, Stephen, but I think we made pretty enthusiastic overtures about digging into that with Montpelier, and they were not as ready for those conversations as we were.
Because it's 2 districts talking to each other, the Act 73 Act 73 really does put that on pause because we're not sure exactly, because you would have to merge the districts for us to be able to merge the high schools. Otherwise, they just have to close one, and that Montpelier isn't going to close their high school. I mean, it's the same size, virtually the same size schools.
That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. I'm
Well,
talking about
you
our
mentioned
district.
bringing students into the U32 facility, and that just jogged my
From our
memory about
fund.
that.
Yeah, well, that's
That was
like
part of the scope of our committee.
That study was looked at, we did a study like that back when I was on the school board, and unfortunately, when that study was done, it was also it was conclusion driven. They had one conclusion they actually wanted. There were a lot of flaws in the rationale of the way that study was performed. I do plenty of studies in my work. When you go in with a really open mind and you look at scenarios. But the whole Montpelier issue is a different one. I'm talking about just within our
Yeah, I understand.
district.
Yeah, I understand. Thanks. Luke?
So I'm really trying to be open-minded here, and so I'm thinking about some of the questions that you had that nobody's answered yet, something around, what would make you proud about a multi-school. I think just being able to articulate myself why I would be behind it, and I think that's what there's a lot of ideas about programming. Will Calais be able to do this next year? Will they not? How long will they be able to do it? If it was, somebody mentioned like a pros and cons list, like if it was literally like just taking, you have it here, sports, music, art, East Calais Elementary, 2026, 2027. Have Jared look at it, say, yes, I can or I cannot, have this programming. Then we could have a like for like, not like just conjecture about, what could possibly be in the programming next year. Like I could get behind something if you could say, my kids are going to have access to these 6 things they just never would have had access to before. If that was better articulated, I think I could make a better, assessment.
Thanks.
I completely agree with you, and I'm asking for the same thing. So, I'm not on the school board. I proposed after one of our recent configuration committee conversations. These were the questions that I came out of the gate asking, and some of those things are directly they're related to staffing questions, and there's a reason why, because of the concerns about people getting the cart before the horse too far down the road with staffing, that it's hard to put those numbers up against each other. But I feel exactly the same way you do, and I'm also waiting and looking for those things. Christine.
As a classroom teacher, you have 90 minutes of math, you have 90 minutes of literacy, you get 45 minutes of special, you get a half-hour recess. Like, the day is regulated, it's not going to change, regardless of more being available. There is just that time. Unless you extend our school day, there is no way to fit more in, regardless of what's available. And those are expectations to the district.
I was just going to touch on what Luke said. I think that some of that, like the extra things, right, is part of what we bring to the community, right? And we advocate for as parents, right? Like, we can't say that necessarily they're going to know everything that we did last year, but maybe they will. It depends on the scenario, right? But you can advocate for those things to happen, right, as a community. Like, we're not, just because if we combine with another school doesn't mean our community's gone, right? And we still work together to try and make things happen.
And I'm trying to take that community, there's so much emotion attached to community, and I'm trying really hard to take that out of the equation and be like, just give me a logical list that I can look at if I can somehow divorce myself from the fact that this is a center of community, which is really hard to do. But I want that to be an easier.
I would also think about how you can use community to advocate for what your kids need or your kids want. I would also disagree a little bit about the amount that you get is the same. I would say as the art teacher, we have an art teacher that goes between 3 different schools. If you go between 3 different schools, you have 3 different classrooms, 3 different sets of materials, 3 schools worth of kids. Your amount that you can actually plan for, the quality of the education that you can give, is much different than if you have 1 classroom and you're focusing on the kids that are there. Not where am I going tomorrow, what are the supplies I have. And so in some cases, right, like with our third, fourth classes, it's the same. But I think that some of our other classes aren't. And that's where the inequity happens.
I was just going to ask, maybe to some of your questions or concerns you were just bringing up, and maybe to one of your points too, Anna, acknowledging that, not putting the cart before the horse with regards to staffing and things like that. I was just curious, process related, continuing the investigation of this model. Is there a role or a place for the principals to actually provide some additional detail? Like, for instance, say someone at East Montpelier, whoever the principal is, they say, I have this many students and this kind of budget, influx of cash from not having to spend it on Calais. We've got this much extra to do, and this is how I would want to run my school. These are the things that I could offer. More just like detail for the community, detail for the board, detail for you guys to help kind of inform those decisions. But again, acknowledging you don't want to rile people up if you're not even going to go down that route from the board perspective. But I think no offense to Stephen, but I think it sounds like at the district level, like we're talking about numbers that are like 1.2 SEL. Like we'd like to talk about widgets. Like maybe it'd be more helpful to hear from some of the principals who could give you a more well-rounded picture of what could be on offer.
Hearing that as feedback rather than a question I can answer in this moment, but thank you for that. We have 15 more minutes. Does anybody want to talk about, we haven't given a lot of attention or time to the middle school model. I had it in my introduction a little bit. We heard from Becca Tatichef, who's the principal of U32, about what an expanded middle school model might look like, and also like describing our current two-grade middle school model. And again, Stephen, before he was our superintendent, was the principal of U32. But I thought there were a couple important points of emphasis that she raised about there being interesting opportunities when you have 3 grades together at the middle school level. You have more of a social and emotional growth trajectory rather than with just 2 grades where you don't have people building the same level of social and emotional sort of responsibility bearing in that period. And I'm way outside my area of expertise, and I'm just trying to give an honest account of what she said. But I was really intrigued by that. I also know that I've had numerous families come to me directly, and this is anecdotal, I will grant, but who have had 6th graders in the small schools who've really struggled because they were growing out of that space and they were ready to move into a bigger pond. And I think there's an exciting opportunity to build a much more robust sort of middle school curriculum, and it requires, see Marcus, Mark probably has some great thoughts to add. There's a lot of work to be done around that because middle school licensure is a whole other thing, and there's a lot of professional development work to do there before we could have it where we want it. But it's a really exciting sort of growth opportunity as I see it for the district. Mark, did you want to bring something?
So just kind of some practical questions. And plenty of you know, I teach at U32 at the high school. I've got a 5th grader here at Calais and a 7th grader at U32. I would not at all have been concerned if Thomas was at U32 as a 6th grader. Be fine. Not really concerned about that. But one of the reasons that I tell parents that I'm not particularly concerned about that kind of thing is the middle school is its own building. It's downstairs. So I guess the question I have is practically, if we have 3 grades, because I'm down there pretty often with an 8th grade TA, they look relatively full. if we had 6th, 7th, and 8th at U32, would they fit downstairs where the middle school is now? Or would they spill into the upstairs somewhat? Like, how would we organize that?
So there would have to be a little bit of work I'm assuming that we would need some space upstairs, but we also have the ability to separate off the wing that you're on.
Yes.
To that part. I would also say that our average class size right now in our middle school is 13 to 14 kids. And so those are small classes for a middle school. So there's some consolidation space within just the size. Next year's middle school will have 83 kids in the 7th grade and 85 kids in the 8th grade. Those are the smallest class sizes that I've seen in my 12 years here in the district. And so I just want to also say that part of administration's need from the board is decisions so that we can decide timelines that are appropriate for our kids at the time. I keep hearing, and I understand, like, we can't make things happen all at once across the district. There's multiple changes that we're talking about here. How do we phase those in so that people are trained appropriately, that the community is forewarned appropriately, that kids have the opportunity to adjust? There's so many things. Timelines for transition are built around board and community decisions as well, because we're not going to rush moving kids. If this vote were to occur in June, we're not obviously going to move the kids the next year. Not that we're due, but I think that there are cutoff times that we have to agree upon so that we're thoughtful about this approach. Because moving a 6th grade to U32 also requires us to talk to all of our 6th grade teachers, or teachers who may want to stay in an elementary school who are 6th grade, and maybe there's a 5th or 4th grade teacher who says, hey, I'd like to be a part of a middle grades program. We don't know that yet. We haven't talked to our staff about that. And so there's a lot of considerations that we have to have, and being respectful of what people's wishes are in their own career path as well. And how do we support them if they want to be a part of our middle grades program?
I think I turned the question backwards just a little bit, and this goes to kind of choosing to homeschool some children for a period of time, is, the growth. So, the kids are growing up. They want to grow up. They really do. They want to grow up. But looking back at my childhood, I wish I was still a child. I wish I stayed back a little bit. So to necessarily just give into that, grow up and turn it around and say, we actually want our kids to be kids an extra year. I think the facility up there, I went to middle school at U32 and high school, and the facility is, the middle school wing's great. Since I was there, it sounds like some harder to take drugs have come in. So that's my concern with young kids. But I think a lot of Vermont has in flux of that.
Yeah.
Curious about the timeline. If this were to go to a vote March, are you looking to start this in the fall, 26, 27?
Yeah, and Stephen just spoke to that. It's come up a bunch of times. I think I can't give you a satisfactory answer, and I think there's also the budget to consider. But the budget has to be voted on town meeting day.
But it could potentially happen in the fall.
That would.
I think these are the discussions that we have to have, and the reason the non-answer to that is that the budget has to be approved by the board by the second meeting in January, and so we would be operating on that budget for the following year. I would just say, please tune into the budget discussions. We're putting those numbers together. That'll help you understand some of the configuration pieces as well. They're intertwined.
And just to know, there's nothing on here about 6th grade moving out, so I'm just I missed your introduction, but just reading this, it doesn't nowhere, I don't have my readers with me, but nowhere am I seeing that 6th grade is being proposed to be moved up, so I think just informing the public. And also, Stephen, you said that you thought maybe the 3 grades would be able to be downstairs at U32 middle school?
Not all the services, no.
Or 6, 7, and 8 wouldn't fit.
I have to do the full math. So their course could probably fit downstairs, but some of their auxiliary classes that they have, so we have classrooms that are used for other purposes down there. Those might have to be moved upstairs. It's that kind of thing might have to happen.
One last quick question. Population at Doty right now and the projected population?
So the current population at Doty is 57 students, and the expectation next year is 50.
At one point, you had mentioned that East Montpelier would be a new school because we wouldn't call it East Montpelier if Calais was going there. Would that mean, like what, I know we're not talking about details, but if it's a new school, does that mean everyone has to reapply for their job, or would it be like unionized? Like if you're in the union and you are at Calais, but then you've been here for 15 years and that third grade teacher's only been there for 4, do you get to boot that person out? You know, like have you, I don't know, talked about that or like?
So I would just say that Mark and I have to have that discussion because Mark is also the association president. Co-president.
I don't want to take that away.
But, and along with Ben Weiss, who is the co-president. So these are discussions that we have to have as well. And I think that we'll need to make sure that our staff is able to get preference, right? So I mean, like, and I think it gives us an opportunity to say to people like, what is your first preference around the work that you do? I don't think reapplying is going to be a good term for us to use because for the most part what we see is we're going to need all of our teachers like in the reconfiguration as well, usually through attrition. Like we have a few teachers leave every year anyway. Filling positions hasn't been easy in the last few years, so we're not looking to see that there is a great number of teacher loss at the elementary level. I can't speak to U32 yet because we just haven't even looked at how that might be.
And not to concern myself, but just, I don't know how many people know this, but like because we're one district and it's one union, they wouldn't be applying for a different job. There's the question of seniority and how many positions are there, but it's the same employer, no matter what building you're in. It's not like you move from a Calais employee to East Montpelier employee. We're a district employee, no matter where we are.
Ainsley and Julie both have your hands raised, so.
Okay, I just have 2 questions. Your comments made me wonder about principalship and how that would be decided, and if that would potentially go to vote to help schools feel like they aren't losing their leader, and if there's been conversation there. I don't know if you want to.
I would just simply say that we've never gone to a vote for a principal position, so that would not be the way that we would do that.
I don't think so.
These are the hard and delicate conversations that we have to have with personnel, but I think that there certainly needs to be a process by which it's open and fair.
It's my understanding that do the principals operate under no, so it wouldn't be necessarily a seniority situation.
The principals don't have seniority.
Yes.
They do have contracts that we have to follow the rules of, but they're not tenured employees.
So then it would not be I don't know how I'm trying to phrase this.
It's not automatic.
It's not automatic that a receiving principal at East Montpelier would have a job over a Calais principal. Is that what I hear you saying?
I think that's what you hear me saying, and that's a tough conversation to have in public, right? Because these are conversations that I have to have with Jared and Alicia and our leadership team as a whole.
Yes.
And I will say that we have had some of these conversations.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
In their earliest stages.
Sorry, it's teacher conference day. My brain's starting to shut down. I do have one other one though, and that is I'm wondering, especially in lieu of conversations around 6th grade going to U32, and the differences between Calais and Doty's population. If this has to be a package deal, or if it doesn't.
So right now, I would say that the only thing that looks like a package deal is that if the movement of the 6th grade U32 had happened, we would have 5 elementary schools that were small at that point in time, right? So So that would be problematic from the Act 73 definitions of small school. And so we have to be real careful of just saying, if we just move the 6th grade, that could make all of our elementary schools vulnerable through the Act 73 process. So we want to be real careful of doing that.
Let's say more vulnerable.
More vulnerable, yes, in that process. And so I think that that's a consideration that we have to have. One thing in and of itself could create other issues if we're not careful with this.
Okay, hold on, sorry. We are at time, and Julie had her hand raised, so I think we're gonna answer Julie's question and then potentially wrap it.
And it might just be a comment to write down for later, but I was looking at the equitable access to sports, and it's my understanding that at East Montpelier you have to pay to play sports, and at Calais you don't. So I'm wondering how that would change, because I know there's a lot of families at Calais that are going to be able to afford playing East Montpelier.
I have a lot of questions about that too. It's the same with Berlin, which has also a municipal recreation. Yeah, I think
That's a scary thing for me as a parent with sport. I mean, I can afford it.
I think
but
the
it's scary
solution
to
is
think
for our district's athletic department, the elementary schools, to be superior to East Montpelier's and Berlin's, and for them to naturally get absorbed. But that would require our elementary athletics program to be superior to them. And thus far, it feels like they see more value in staying independent. That's just my perception. Thank you very much to our scribes.
Real quick, I just want to say, what this shows is that no matter where you are on it, you care about the education of the children in our community. We have an extremely strong staff. You see, a lot of them are here tonight. And regardless of these conversations, we're going to continue to do what we're supposed to do. And that's just the end of it. We're just going to keep doing those things. I'm a small guy that can carry a big burden. Let me carry it, it's fine. But we will continue to do what we're doing. So I just wanted to make sure that that was said.
And thank you, Daniel.
Thank you.